We've seen a bunch of Muslim-majority countries put bans on the burqa and hijab in public schools, universities, and government buildings. For instance, Tunisia started this trend back in 1981, with a partial lift in 2011, and Turkey followed a gradual partial lift. Other places like Kosovo, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan have also imposed similar bans. Fast forward to recent news, and France has made headlines for its stance on the hijab. Despite months of protests from sports organizations, France decided to stick with its ban on hijab-wearing athletes for the 2024 Olympics. Human rights groups are calling this move a big contradiction to France's promise of gender equality in the Games, and, at worst, a violation of international human rights treaties. Anna Bush from Amnesty International points out that this situation highlights a serious issue. When France talks about equality, it seems like Muslim women aren't really included in that vision. She emphasizes how crucial it is for human rights organizations to speak out and support Muslim women's rights groups who have faced demonization and vilification for years. To add more heat to the situation, Amnesty International recently published a report slamming French authorities for what they describe as discriminatory hypocrisy regarding their hijab bans in sports like soccer, volleyball, and basketball. The report sheds light on the racial and gender discrimination that French Muslim athletes face, both at the professional and amateur levels. It also criticizes the International Olympic Committee for not pressuring French authorities to lift the ban, which only affects French participants and not athletes from other countries. In September, French Sports Minister Amélie Oudéa-Castéra confirmed that the hijab ban will remain in place for the Olympics, even though the IOC doesn't have a universal rule against headscarves. This ban is part of a broader trend of secularist policies in France that disproportionately impact Muslim girls and women. For instance, the 2004 law that banned ostentatious religious symbols in public schools led to a hijab ban, and a 2023 decision further restricted students by banning the abaya, a modest robe. In response, the IOC issued a statement to Time clarifying their stance. While their own rules allow women to wear the hijab, French athletes are considered civil servants who must adhere to national secularism, laïcité principles. This means they are prohibited from wearing overtly religious symbols, including the hijab, when representing France in official capacities. However, athletes, including those from France, are allowed to wear hijabs in the athletes' villages. The IOC statement also mentioned that a French athlete who wears a hijab qualified for the 2024 Olympics, and the situation was reportedly resolved to everyone's satisfaction. A spokesperson from the French Sports Ministry added that while athletes are not banned from competing due to their religious beliefs, secularism rules provide a framework for the use of religious symbols, including the hijab. The ministry emphasized that there isn't a blanket ban on wearing the veil in sports settings in France. Instead, the law specifies two cases where bans apply, one for political and religious symbols on the French national teams, and the other for amateur sports. The impact of France's hijab ban on Muslim athletes extends beyond the Olympics, affecting various levels of French sports. A notable example is the French Basketball Federation's FFBB Article 9.3, which, implemented in December 2022, bans the wearing of any equipment with a religious or political connotation, including the hijab. Hélène Barr, a 22-year-old basketball player, has been vocal about this issue. After taking a 4-year break to study international law, she sought to return to professional basketball in 2022, only to discover that the French Basketball Federation prohibited head coverings. It was a real shock, Barr told Time, because in the French context, it means you can't play as a hijabi player. She recounted an incident where she was benched during a game because a referee deemed her sports hijab dangerous, refusing to let her play unless she removed it. This experience not only impacted her mental health but also deprived her of the physical benefits of playing sports. Barr isn't the only one affected. Diaba Konate, 24, a promising basketball player who excelled in the U18 European Championship and the Youth Olympic Games in 2018, also face challenges due to the hijab ban. After earning a scholarship to play at UC Irvine in the US, Konaté found her prospects of playing for France again dwindling. She told Al Jazeera about her feelings of humiliation when she was informed that she could not participate in French tournaments while wearing her hijab, which she began wearing 2 years ago. Furthermore, banning the hijab has never truly aligned with universal human rights principles throughout history, for several reasons. Historically, such bans often reflect deeper societal tensions and conflicts, rather than genuine concerns for safety or secularism. Firstly, these bans typically undermine freedom of religion and expression, which are fundamental human rights enshrined in international treaties like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. These documents affirm that individuals should be free to practice their religion and express their beliefs, including through attire like the hijab. Secondly, bans on religious symbols often disproportionately affect specific communities, leading to increased marginalization and discrimination. In many cases, these policies target Muslim women, reinforcing stereotypes and perpetuating societal divisions. Rather than fostering inclusivity, such measures tend to alienate and disenfranchise those who wish to practice their faith openly. Moreover, historical precedents show that such bans do not effectively address the underlying issues they purport to solve. For instance, secularism and neutrality are meant to ensure that state institutions do not favor any religion, but when applied in ways that target specific groups, they can exacerbate social divisions rather than mitigate them. Countries that have implemented hijab bans often face criticism for these policies being used as tools for political or ideological agendas, rather than genuine concerns about secularism or public safety. Lastly, the imposition of such bans can be seen as a form of cultural imperialism, where dominant cultural norms are enforced at the expense of minority practices. This approach fails to recognize and respect cultural diversity, and instead promotes a homogenized view of acceptable public behavior, which can be both exclusionary and damaging. Overall, history shows that banning the hijab rarely achieves its intended goals, and often leads to further human rights violations and social discord. On the flip side, there's been a tragic incident that highlights the high stakes surrounding the hijab. Recently in Tehran, Amita Geravand, a teenage girl, died after being injured in a mysterious incident on the city's metro. This happened just weeks after she was hospitalized in a coma, following an injury on October 1st. Her death comes around the 1-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death, which had sparked widespread protests against Iran's mandatory hijab laws. Jerevan's injury and subsequent death are stirring up tensions again, especially as women in Iran continue to defy the country's mandatory headscarf law to protest the theocracy. Iranian state media reported her death without much mention of the broader unrest. There are conflicting accounts about what happened on that day. Some suggest she might have been pushed or attacked due to her hijab, while others cite a possible fall or health issue. Activists are calling for an independent investigation, citing the Iranian government's history of controlling information and coercing confessions. The incident also underscores the broader context of Iran's strict enforcement of hijab laws, with morality police back on the streets, and even harsher penalties being proposed. This ongoing issue has drawn renewed international criticism, especially given the recent award to Iranian activist Narges Mohammadi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her advocacy of women's rights and democracy. While for many observant Muslim women, the hijab symbolizes piety and modesty, in Iran and Afghanistan, it has become a political tool and a source of contention, reflecting deeper struggles within these societies. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Given the complex and often controversial nature of hijab bans and their impact on athletes, how do you think countries should address religious and cultural attire in sports? Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below.